Okay, this is a video about hydrogen, and specifically, this video is about making hydrogen to use in garbage trucks. Now, I made a video like this before, and I was forced to remove it. And I have assured everybody that there is nothing confidential. This is all from public information. And as I've said in a couple of other videos, I've said this in a couple of videos, for me, the key to doing this is to have a nice levelized unit cost. It could be the cost of garbage. It could be the cost of, uh, I don't know, the fine, the cost of running a truck, running a car, anything. Last time I used the issue about a horse. Okay, okay. You can do all of this by having a good calculator of the unit cost. And really, once you have that, the whole business is doing some counting. The second thing you need, I think, is to understand how storage and flows work. And I'm not an engineer, but I'm slowly learning how to cross, multiply, and divide. That we need some cases. So other cases I'm gonna probably waste your time on. After I talk about just using hydrogen for trucks, I'm also going to talk about what happens if we have really cheap solar. Somewhere where the sunlight is so good we can get a really high capacity factor of solar. Of course, we can't produce solar at night, and we want to make hydrogen with our really cheap solar power, but we may want our hydrogen all the time. So we might want to store it. We're going to have to store some hydrogen. Is it better to store the hydrogen or store the solar? And for that matter, you might have to store the hydrogen anyway, because if you're going to use it to make our garbage trucks, you're only going to dispense this hydrogen one time a year. So we're going to use some, we're going to look at some different ways to get electricity. And related to that, we can say, let's just understand, we could store the hydrogen, or we could actually build a battery along with our solar and store the solar. What's the kind of cost of storing the hydrogen versus storing the solar? And then we can look at this issue of economies of scale. And that's what I'm going to introduce today. What happens if we want to build a much smaller electrolyzer at our own facility and not pay for distribution? And distribution can kind of be a high cost of this stuff. Is it worth losing the economies of scale and but not having to pay for the distribution? And what's this business of, the electrolyzer is a very old technology, but natural gas has been used really for producing hydrogen, for the ammonia, and for the industrial uses, other industrial uses. Is what are the real economics of using natural gas or electricity? And finally, there's this business I'm just hearing about of some kind of perpetual blah blah blah, where you can actually the idea is to make get a solar panels and use the solar panels to produce hydrogen, and then with the electrolyzer store the hydrogen, then get a fuel cell and basically use the hydrogen as a battery. So those are some of the issues. I hope to have more, and we can do any of this works by just creating a LCOE calculator. Now, I don't want this stuff. Okay, I'm not going to go through making spinner boxes and all that. Let's say we have a high load factor for our electrolyzer. This is only the electrolyzer. So an electrolyzer, you put let's use this. You get power, and you put the power into an electrolyzer, and that produces the hydrogen. Later, you might have to store the hydrogen, dispense the hydrogen, compress the hydrogen in order to store it, and get it out here. So there are a lot of uh, parts to this. And I hope I got them right. Maybe I didn't. Maybe I didn't. Okay. Now, there we have also, and this is getting apparently pretty easy to get. What we did is my friend, this I hope I have his name pronounced correctly. He's wonderful. He's been studying, and he's an engineer, and he goes through all these formulas with me, and he's collected all this data. When he collects this data, by the way, it's really interesting. Some people try to argue what the cost of all this stuff is, and then they give you these PowerPoint slides. And in these PowerPoint slides, they say, here's the cost of hydrogen, here's the efficiency and the cost. And you don't know how it's done, but it's not so hard. Once you get the levelized cost calculator, you can do this yourself. You don't have to rely on some PowerPoint slides and some experts from NREL or someplace to do this. And so he got these different electrolyzer estimates. And then the key thing is this thing. I don't really understand it, but let's go with it. I don't care. It really doesn't matter. When people talk about the cost of one of these things, they express the capex, the cost, in terms of kilowatts, which is an input, not an output. I don't quite know why you wouldn't express the cost per hydrogen produced, but this is for the capacity. I guess you could measure in kilowatts, and then we're going to convert the kilowatts to a kilogram of hydrogen, which is the primary measure. And then so we've got different kind of efficiencies for different units, and this is like a heat rate that I'm used to in natural gas. The kilowatts is the input, so if we have more inputs per output, it's worse. The efficiency is different, and this is a proton. Ooh, I can't remember the word. I had to write it down. Oh, this is a proton exchange membrane. Okay, good. And there's an alkaline. And Maximiliano says this is the PEM is better for the environment, and I need to ask him again why. And then there's some other technologies with different costs and different efficiencies, and we've got to incorporate all of that in our analysis. And this database here, we have the different sizes in terms. Where's the MW? We have larger sizes and smaller sizes and all of this. And what we can do then is just put this together. And where was my electrolyzer analysis? So here's what you can do when you have you want to make a graph. I want to make a graph, and I want to put a line here, and I want to say, okay, what's the cost per kW, and how much does the cost go up if the size changes? And we have this data. Now I guess I'll explain it later, but if you want to make a quick graph, just delete the little thing here, press maybe Alt F1, and then change it around and make it a XY graph, and then just throw this in and put a okay, this has to be, I gotta click on this one, I guess, add a trend line, and get a what, not a logarithmic. Let's get that, so we can then get some estimates of the economies of scale. Okay, that's the first thing. Okay, so we can get what the cost. This is purely the cost to produce hydrogen. Now I'm going to, of course, go through the detail. I guess I'm going to try to drill down. Okay, and if we have what happens if we have a really low cost of electricity? What happens to our cost of our electrolyzer? What happens if we have a different kind of a vendor? And what happens if we have a larger versus a smaller kind of unit? Now, that's a little bit premature, and I haven't put the steam membrane. What was steam membrane reforming? I haven't done that one yet. Okay, but let's get to the case we're really going to do, which is this refuse trucks. Now, here's an example of a hydrogen refuse trucks. And Mario, if you think because you gave me a picture of this that's violating something and I'm going to take down the video, I'm not going to do that. Sorry, because I got friends who might be interested, like one friend. Now, this one is a nice diagram. This came from Frederick in the Netherlands, who's been really, really helpful on this stuff. And I haven't ever talked to him, and I want to talk to him, but he says, let's take the power in here. I've already shown you this. Put it in an electrolyzer. So we've got to put the LCOE of the power that comes in here. And if you sneak, you can see I've got the LCOE of the power. That's the levelized cost of electricity. We put it in this and we get the levelized cost of hydrogen. And then we compress it and store it, and we put the storage LCOE, and that's really the compression and the storage. And then we dispense it and put it in the truck. And finally, after we dispense it, we get the cost per kilogram. And we just do all of these parts and we just work through all the levelized costs. And each one of these could have a different lifetime, including this truck. Each one's going to have a different, some kind of efficiency measure where we take energy and get kilometers, or we take energy and get hydrogen, or we take solar energy and get electricity. Each one's going to have some sort of conversion we're going to have to make. Each one's going to have a capital cost and an operating cost. And the operating cost is going to often include a lot of energy. And so that's all we have to do is get a flexible enough financial model. Remember, I'm just an old financial modeler. Okay, and at the end of the day, let's start at the end. We'll get the cost of hydrogen, including all the storage and all that. And then we'll get the cost of we'll see what the cost of a conventional refuse truck is. I'm not saying lorry because in Australia, I guess they use truck. And then we get the difference, and then we see how much distance, and you can get kind of how much, in this case, it costs more for the hydrogen cost more than the refuse. Not surprising. Probably costs a lot more, and it depends on all of these different kind of variables, not the least of which is what kind of rate of return do we really want. Okay. Now I had to press that for a minute. Now let's just go through some of the kind of assumptions, and for me this is a lot of counting, and you've got there's going to be a problem with storage, which seems to be, it's an inventory problem. Now, let's say let's start with how many kilometers. I kind of start with the demand almost. How many kilometers are we going to drive our truck? So this is all disguised. It's not exactly, you can argue that these are a little bit different. Okay, and then what we do is we see, well, what kind of efficiency measure, and we call one of the suppliers and they say, okay, here's how many kilometers, kilograms you need for a kilometer. Like this would be if you're in the US, kilometers per liters per kilometer is a conventional truck. Okay, it's just a measure of how much stuff do we need to make a kilometer. Okay, so that's that, whatever that means. I don't know. It's got some efficiency buried into it. So in that case, we need this much hydrogen for 1 year if we're going to have this many years. So we just start doing the engineer where where I have to figure out, well, kg per year times kg per km, I mean km per year times kg per km. You cross multiply and divide, and the km's cancel out, don't they? Okay, and then we see, well, let's run this electrolyzer all the time. Let's buy an electrolyzer ourselves. We're going to buy one of these things, and we're going to run it to fill up our truck. And nothing, no human being, nothing can really operate 100% of the time. You need a holiday and all this. You need to do some maintenance on yourself. I clearly need to do some real maintenance on my brain right now. I need to get out. And then, so we're not operating 8766. That includes a leap year. We're operating at the whole time. And I put a little provision in here because maybe later we want to just operate during the sunlight hours, and then we're going to kind of waste some of our electrolyzer capacity. Okay. And then I said, well, okay, let's, what are we doing here? Let's figure out, well, how many, if this is how many we need per year, how much do we need per hour? And then because this electrolyzer is for some reason expressed and sized in kW, which is the input, not the output, don't ask me why, and I'm not going to argue against the rest of the world on this, and maybe there's a good reason for this. I'm sure there is, but this is how much kilowatt we would need of an electrolyzer, not a megawatt. Now this, when I did this, I didn't put the scale here, sorry, because when I make these XY things, there must be a way to automatically make the scale. I should know that. But this is the megawatt. So we're way down here. We're tiny. And we'd have to almost kind of make a, what I used, we could either compute this with a line, or I used my little interpolate function, which maybe isn't the kind of best. So when I did this, and I'm just thinking out loud because when we do this, this doesn't really have something less than zero. We don't know if this was really small, how much it would go up here. And then I try to do some curve fitting. When you make one of these curves, by the way, it puts the thing here, but you can easily, all you do is take the megawatts here and take the log of the megawatts, okay, and then you put in the cost because that's our data, and then we can get a slope and an intercept. So I suppose instead of what I did here is when, oh, I don't care about you. When it, let's not, don't hold that against me. When we choose a size, this is less than one megawatt, and then I interpolate, and I'm going to pause the video for just a second. So what that was a little bit embarrassing, but I don't really have something less than one. I just added a little bit of a ratio to get the less than one. So if we have this size, we can then do a little interpolate function. And in this interpolate function, I'm not going to go through it right now, and you can get it about in 1 second, 2 seconds, from the generic macros these days. You just interpolate. So right now, if I have 0.4, we're somewhere between this and this. Okay, and the other thing I can do is I can try these different data sources. And we get different data sources from calling a vendor. Let me see. This one is a vendor, and this one is the NREL, excuse me. And I don't know, there were a couple of averages here. And then what we can do is just eventually go down and put a little a code number. So this code number is as normal 1, 2, 3, or 4, and we can add a fifth one or sixth one, which you can do. I'm going to put a selected. You can put an input input to whatever option. I don't know. Input selection, just input. How's that? Oh God! And then we put our size, and so you can just put your own in. When you do that, for no, oops, shoot. Maybe I need to put a little increase one. What I do, and oh no, what I do is I kind of derive a little slope here. Just use the log and kind of compute a slope, and then you put 1 point in the slope, and you can derive what the slope will be of the line. So in this case, if we have half a megawatt, I just put that in, and I said, okay, let's start with this slope, and then adjust it. We have a little line, and we can compute the difference for the size. And then what we do is, that's a horrible explanation. I'm sorry about that. Let me insert, oh God. Let me insert a couple of lines, and okay. And so we get our you can put your own in. And how about this? I'm going to leave this blank, and then at the very end, you just use a choose command. And you use a choose command for each one of them, and then you can print the graph out and do all the rest. Okay? I think that's okay, right? So we'll have you put your own in and put a little curve to make it work. And I got to do this here. Choose, you put the number in. I don't even have to lock it in because I'm doing it at the last time. And I didn't have the appropriate efficiency in. And so if it's 1, we'll take this one. 2, we'll take this one. 3, we'll take this one. 4, we'll take this one. And 5, we'll take the last one, which we haven't filled in yet. Okay, and then we go, and I'm going to work through this a lot more. We're going to go through our electrolyzer technology, and in this one, I'm just going to take this from our electrolyzer analysis, so we can make sure that if we switch this around, then we get our different efficiency and cost. We can kind of see which would give you the best option. Okay. Just a little bit of background. I'm going a little bit back and forth, and I apologize for that. And then we're going to make an analysis of the each one of these. And I've tried to, in this database, put the cost of a dispenser. So a little bit down here, we have the cost of the dispenser, we have the cost of the compression and storage, and it's all a little tricky for me. And the first thing that I really need to get to before we start putting all these costs in, we have to figure out how much storage we need. Now, I think I stopped here somewhere where I stopped here. I think this is the size of the electrolyzer, which is really tiny, and then we decide how many trucks we have. So let's put Let's make a big fleet, 100 trucks. I don't know how many a town has. That would seem to be probably a pretty big place. And then now, because we have this, we have a bigger electrolyzer. We have 1.22 megawatts for that one. This many kilowatts, so divided by 1,000, you get this many megawatts, and then you can get the effect of the economies of scale. That's what I was trying to get to. Okay, now once you have this production, well, you know, you're going to produce it 97% of the time for 8,500 hours out of 8,766 hours. All right. Okay, we're going to get that total production from the electrolyzer for across the year. And it doesn't have two E's there. Okay. And I suppose I should be really careful about these, whether it's a year or this is just an instant. This is a year. Okay, and here's our production. Now that means if I divide this by 365.25 for the leap year for the February 29th of every Olympics year except this year, then you get the amount you produce daily. But you know, these people, we don't make people work on a Saturday or a Sunday. So we see, well, I gotta take this production and we're going to use it each 5 days and dispense it out once a day. I'm going to assume we dispense it out once a day. So how much storage do we have if we're going to produce this every single day? Now, what I do, and maybe this is completely obvious to you, what I try to think about is I think, I'm kind of stupid about this stuff. It takes me a while, and I'm thinking, well, a lot of people get this stuff right away, and it's obvious too, but other people don't. And when you work through storage, like storage of a battery, storage of electricity, you start with when you're going to store, and if it's battery, you start with the when the sun shines and you have enough electricity to store something. And then you take it out of storage, and eventually you get what's left over at the very end. Now, I did not put any losses here. It's possible that we could have 1% loss, and that means that we'd have to have an extra 1% of the we have to have a bigger storage, but I'm going to leave that out just for now because I'll get confused by something that simple. Okay, so here's how much we put in every day, and here's how much we take out every 5 days. So on Saturday, we put this in, and we get that much in storage. That goes up to the opening balance. So I always think of the debt opening balance and the closing balance, and then we put that much in there, and then we got this much. We have this much. And then that's our opening balance. But now we produce it, but now we take it out. We dispense it maybe for 30 minutes a day, just one time a day, maybe 40 minutes, whatever. We take it out, and that's how much we have left in storage. And then when we're finished, all with the whole day, the maximum amount of storage we have to have is right here. I hope I have that right. I hope I haven't missed anything. You tell me. When I think about it, maybe I'll think that I missed something here. Because how much do you have? You start here, you produce, and I suppose if you dispense before you produce during the day, I suppose if you dispense in the morning, you'd have to take this and make a little subtotal. And let's assume we're dispensing at night, because if you dispense in the morning, you're going to have this number plus the amount you produce. So I'm gonna add a little thing here for maximum storage storage if dispense in morning. And this is exactly, for me, this is the kind of stuff you don't have to do anything. I was about to say have to, but you're going to take this number. If we're going to dispense in the beginning of the day, we better have this big opening balance plus the amount we're dispensing during the day. Okay, and if we do that, then we better on Monday morning have enough storage tanks to get this much amount out. So I could put a little maximum and figure out how much I have to store. Now you could get all much fancier and put holidays in and go through every week of the year or every hour of the day and get that. But that for me that's a crucial thing. And actually, even though I said you could put a year in and a day in and all that, for me, with my small mind, you got to understand it for one period. If you can understand it for one period, then then you can start to get more complicated. So for the required storage capacity, this is how we measure the storage. It's in a tank. You don't measure it in kilowatts or anything else, and that's what you have to do. Now, I suppose let's look at that. When you store this hydrogen, you also have to compress it before you store it. So that this, you have to do something, and this takes some electricity to compress it. And then we put it in these tanks, and then we get it out with a dispenser. And it doesn't show other equipment. Okay, enough. Now, when we then again, Maximiliano gave me this data on storing, and it was all kind of complicated. He gave me some specs here. Where was this? It was, you have to compress it, and when you compress it, it doesn't tell you how many kg you have. All it does is give you a unit for compressing on a high pressure or low pressure. But when it gives the storage, here's the unit. Here's a storage unit, and it gives you how many kilograms you have in that storage unit. So what I did is just put the storage and the compression units together. Of course, it's free, this video, so I could have made mistakes. I probably did. Okay. And we start with how much kilowatt hour storage we need, and then we figure out how much kg is in each unit, how many units you need, so you just divide this stuff out. If you learn how to cross, multiply, and divide, or whatever that's called, or cancel things out, that's all you have to do, and then you get your total amount of the cost of storage by multiplying it by how many units you have, and I suppose you could round this up or down, and then I get the cost of the storage per storage. But when we figure out the amount we compress, that's a little bit different. We've got to figure out how much the compression costs per unit, but when we compress this stuff, we're back to not in the maximum amount of a storage tank. We're in the how much we really produce per year, because that's going to have to end up getting compressed. And I mean, you might lose some things in between, and that's like in a battery charging and discharging, and I don't have that in. And then eventually we'll go through our storage, okay? And I hope, I'm trying to, my friend said, don't make this so complicated. How can you not be a little complicated? You've got to go through item by item by item, and then you can see, well, how much kilograms do we have? What's our total upfront? How about I'll call this CapEx? And then we figure out, well, what's our operating costs? And for the operating costs, you need to know how much you produce per year, and you need to know what your general kind of overheads are. And then you can put this in terms of instead of even though you're buying on a per kg basis, when you actually compute the storage is a storage tank that has a certain amount of capacity. The production, when we compute our total production, we're gonna get it on a per a kilogram basis. And that's kind of a little bit sad right now, because after I changed that number, we get a higher number for the compression and the storage. Now, when we go through any of these, we have to decide what the lifetime of one of these compressors and the electrolyzers will be in the compression. And right now I have a lifetime of 15. If we made the lifetime 25, I don't know, and that would have a pretty big effect on the numbers. Okay, and we're getting a pretty high price for this compression and storage. And if we dispense, let's put the maximum, if we do it at nighttime in the day, that's after we've produced, then we get a lower storage, and that had a pretty dramatic effect. I didn't really expect that on the overall cost of hydrogen. Okay, I'm going to leave that like that. And we do, once we've got the storage, then we said, okay, well, how much? Remember, we dispense this for 1 day out of the 5 days, but this dispenser is, we can buy a kind of more expensive dispenser or a slower dispenser, and they're measured. You measure a dispenser not in terms of the total amount, it's the amount per minute you can get out. You can get a fast one or a slow one, so you get we say, okay, we want to dispense this in half an hour. We don't want people sitting there forever. Okay, and if we do that, then we take our total kilograms and we figure out how many do we have per minute. And then we see what the capacity of each pump is, and we figure out how many pumps we need. And then that's the capital cost. And there could be some fuel associated with the pumps, but this is a flow. This is per minute. This one was a capacity that's just purely fixed. This one was also a capacity, not a flow, which was the electricity, and then we had to use the load factor. So we got all of these. And finally, last but not least, and I'm not, anybody who says I'm taking something confidential, that's BS. The last thing you got to do is figure out, well, what's the what how much extra is the truck itself going to cost? Now, my friend gave me this kind of stuff, which shows here's here's a hybrid, I guess, electricity vehicle. Here's a battery powered. We got batteries here, batteries here, batteries here. And this one you have an engine somewhere, right? Here's the is that where's somewhere's the engine? Okay, there's a fuel tank. Okay, and all right, this one is a fuel cell. This is a hydrogen one. We have a hydrogen tank, and the big advantage is, you know, if you have these garbage trucks, the batteries are just too much. You can't get enough batteries in there, and then you'd have to sit there and be charging them for hours and hours and hours. Instead, we put our hydrogen into the tank, and we have a fuel cell somewhere. Okay, of course, this file will be up on the website, and that fuel cell essentially is like charging the battery. I should really explain that or know a lot more about that, but I don't. All I know is how to put a LCOE calculator together. Okay, and all I know is how to, instead of just throwing numbers around in some PowerPoint slide, just every single, in my opinion, every time somebody presents an LCOE in any kind of PowerPoint slide, they should give you an Excel file just like this, and you just put your numbers in, and then you're finished. And the question is, right now, how much extra are the trucks? And in the future, really, what kind of different materials do the trucks actually use? And in the future, how much more will they cost? Now, before we go through our final kind of analysis and do a little bit of sensitivity analysis with different required returns and with different other things, I'm going to review for the umpteenth time, and I'm sorry about this. We go through our solar. And so does not solar look easy now? All we need to know is a capital cost. Here's the cost per kW, and here's a cost I got in an island of India or something like this. And then we need to know, well, how much do we utilize that cost? How if we have a fixed cost, a fixed like factory, and you only can use it 23% of the time, which is good for solar, not bad at all. Then we spread that cost over the number of hours. Okay, and then we have to add some operation and maintenance, and we do all of this a little bit at the top, and then all of this stuff, I've gone through it before, and you can go through it yourself. What you need to do is put some returns and some lives and some taxes and some debt, and you have a few little PMT formulas. A PMT, and another video goes through all of that, and you figure out the real carrying charge and the nominal carrying charge and all of that, and then you get your how much capital do you have to recover instead of all up at once up here. All you're doing is spreading this over time. And then I go crazy too. First, the O&M costs you got to be really careful with and not mix up nominal and real flows. If this is the O&M cost per year today, and you're computing levelized cost, well, that O&M cost is going to increase. And that O&M cost, when it increases over time, you can just take some real and nominal discount rate and all adjust it. And now what's happening, as you know, in the world today, right now, we essentially have negative real rates. No, there's no doubt about that. Sometimes they're negative nominal rates, which is really absolutely remarkable. So if I put a 2.5% interest rate in here, and I put a lot of debt financing, that's going to have basically, if we've got a premium above inflation only of 0.5%, and it's mostly debt financed, and the debt also has an interest deduction in there, so you can get a really, really low cost of capital. Okay, and then once you've got all of these PMT formulas, you could theoretically stop. And this is the number, the real rate, the rate that's going to inflate, not the nominal rate that's flat in nominal terms over the long lifetime of an asset. This is it. And we're going to get this in kgs, kms, whatever, miles of Beethoven's horse, whatever we do, we can get this. And then you take this number, multiply it, and you account for degradation, which is a real pain, actually, one of the most painful things. So in this solar one, I should have put 0.5%, not 50%, 0.5%, right? Okay, and even the inflation rate, that's pretty high. But you can get the inflation rate. I'm going to stop. You can get the inflation rate from from the CPI bond. There's a bond you can get that where the interest increases with inflation. You compare that with a regular 10-year bond, and you take the difference between the two, and you can see what kind of accrued thing. There's some risk differences because one is taking a risk of inflation, the other isn't. But you can get this, and this number. So if we put this 21 in there and account for all the taxes, the tax depreciation, the asset balances, do a whole big project finance model and keep the capital structure the same. And this was a pain to all get done, but once you've got it done, it's magic. It really, really is. This 6.1% outcome is the same as you input. And if you think that's too low a rate, you're full of crap. That's why stocks are so high right now. We've got asset inflation because the real cost of capital is so low. I go crazy about that. We don't have to put it in rand or anything else, but you can put different currencies. And that's that. I've explained it once, I've explained it twice, and it's all proven here. And then I'm not going to go through this. You can prove it by different LCOE methods. If you don't like one or the other, it's all there. Whew. Now, when you get to the electrolyzer, that's a little more complicated. Here's why, because there's a stack, something called a stack in electrolyzer, and that stack is not driven by a physical life. It's driven by how many hours. So imagine if it's a person. I should do an LCOE of a person. Ugh, I couldn't do it. It would be negative. I don't know what it would be. The IRR would be really high. Ugh, the risks. But let's pretend you as a person, your life expectancy depends on how much you work. And if you sit around and don't do any work, you have a really long life. And if you waste your time on Excel models and work all the time, you're going to have a shorter life. Okay? That's the stack is a variable life. That makes a gigantic difference. If we, for example, if we decide, I'm going to take my electrolyzer and I'm going to only run it half the time because I'm going to only run it with the sun shines, the life is extended. It's like a variable life. It really changes things. But then we've got some other parts of this electrolyzer. The stack is some kind of thing you put in the middle. I should find a picture of it somewhere. I don't think I have one. So you have to replace this stack in the electrolyzer at a different time compared to the other materials, and you think, shit, that means this whole LCOE stuff is going to be a mess. Well, no, it isn't, because I said 60% of this was stack, 40% was non-stack, and that's going to make a big difference when we do some analysis of what if we change the load factor around. Because if you change the load factor, then you run out of you hit your maximum hours faster. So we start with the regular stuff. Here's how much. Here's our size, which we don't really need that much. Here's our efficiency. So here's we can just take and convert our kgs to our MWs to kgs. Okay, and then we get our cost in per megawatt. And remember, this came from all those interpolations and everything else, and we can put the cost in kilograms if we want, and we get the total cost. We're going to use this total cost down here somewhere to get the capital recovery. How much do we have to recover each and every year once we have the total cost? Okay. And then we have our operations, and the biggest thing in our operations, which is gigantic, and that's what we're going to play with a lot, is the electricity cost. Because if we put a higher electricity cost here, then we're going to get a higher cost. And then we can what am I doing? Okay, once you can convert the electricity cost to the per megawatt hour to kilogram. You can see how much it costs you per year. You can put some other O&M in, and then you get your total O&M per year. And and then I add some water, sorry, and the final thing is the total O&M per year, which is the water plus the electricity, and the water has an efficiency, blah, 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 blah. Okay, and that's again the current cost. So really, this is what I should have underlined. And if you happen to have the generic macro open, you press Shift Control F and you get rid of that thing. That's really what you want. You want the production, the upfront cost, and that's how you work through it. And this time, I said our stack life is only 7 because we have this many hours. We just see how many hours we run. That was in 23. We used our 97, and that's how many hours we run in the year. So you run out of this stack life here, and I put a round. I didn't round it up, okay, or down rather. And so then you're going to use this final life here. This weighted average life doesn't really mean anything. We're going to compute the LCOE for the stack portion, the LCOE for the other portion, and then just add them together. Okay. And then we have to consider the degradation, the inflation, everything else, and we get our total cost finally in real terms and in nominal terms. And it doesn't really matter which one you take, which column you take. I think I put a little thing here so we can take 1, 2, 3, 4 columns. The depreciation shield, which is a pain, is still there. And we get our thing, and I'm totally afraid, but our target equals this. Our financial model is our proof. Our proof, it's just a proof that all those work. Okay, that's the electrolyzer. So we have our cost here. Maybe, if we could get a really low solar cost, that would be really wonderful. But then we'd have to be running it at night with that solar cost, which would be a kind of hard thing to do. And eventually you can kind of see, well, what happens if we have a different electricity cost? What's the kind of break-even electricity cost given our fuel, the cost of our truck? And this shows how much we dispense. The additional cost of the truck is a gigantic number, really. That's an overwhelming thing that's got an overwhelming importance here. Okay, I'm skipping over the SMR again. What was the M was for methane. So God. And now we put I'm reviewing this one more time, but we put our am I recording this video? Yes, I am. Phew, I was just afraid that I stopped recording it, and that would have sucked that I'm just talking to myself. Okay, we need the storage kg, and then we have the cost per kg of compression and storage. And then we figure out, well, how much storage, how much is compressed? This is not the same as the storage. Remember, this storage came from that little analysis we did, and this came from how much we produce. And there might be some losses and all of that in between, and you can factor that in. Okay, and then you figure out how much the electricity you use for compression, which is, I'm being told this is right, you need a whole lot less from compression than the electrolyzer. In fact, the annual energy is here, and then the electric cost is here, which is not a big number compared to 4% of the capital. Okay, and that's, again, the number given by some kind of supplier. And then you get your O&M and upfront cost, and this time, really, it's almost, I'm going to maybe, what I should do is insert a line here, because we have our three things, our production, our O&M, and if I've done this correctly, then the O&M per kg is down here, and we have to adjust it for the inflation, and then we get finally our real and nominal things. And this is just an Excel shortcut, Shift Control 7 if it's in English, or a US keyboard, I guess. And so this is the number I take, the combination of the compression and the storage. Again, you just have to work through a couple of things up front here and leave the rest of the formulas. Look at the formulas, nothing very complicated. Well, I shouldn't quite say that, but it's all there. All of this thing, you can change the lives and all that. I made the plant life longer because I was afraid of this. If we make the life of these tubes 20 years, 20 years sounds like a lot. Let me see, it's 2021, 20 years. It would have been about when they were starting to talk about Monica Lewinsky and Clinton and all that stuff. And it would have been way after the OJ trial, 20 years ago. I have a car that's built about then. And well, it doesn't really run that well. I'm going to have to get rid of my other one. It's not that long because I can't afford anything, because I don't make any money, because I waste my time on videos all the time. Okay, and then we do the same thing with a dispenser. And again, we have the upfront cost. How much is the total amount we dispensed? There was much less O&M cost, and you just work through the whole thing. And you always kind of get the upfront cost, the amount dispensed, and then you go through the whole things. And let's make our dispenser a little bit longer. These dispensers, let's make them last 20 years, okay? I should know that, and it's a key variable, and there's no kind of degradation, I don't think, in those dispensers. And depending, I don't know why I put a different debt to capital ratio in. This is all the same. So now we've got our total cost. Now that's you can see again. There's a lot of sensitivity to the electricity price. Yeah. If we put 0 in for the electricity price, maybe we can do this at nighttime when the prices are negative. That's the kind of cost of capital. It's also very sensitive to the, well, I don't know how sensitive it is to the, well, it won't be because I've got a lot of debt to the cost of capital, but there's a lot of capital intensity in it. Okay, and then we're not quite finished. 10 is too low, obviously. Let's put 30. Okay. These all inflate, by the way. All the O&M costs inflate in this mechanism when you use the real cost. Okay. And right now I'm getting a higher cost. And then we go to LCOR. We make up a new thing, not LCOH, not LCOE, not LCOH, LCOR. And this time, we'll just get one truck. Here's how much we travel per year. Is this the amount? And I should be using a different number. Sorry about that. Okay. And this, I'm going to use the hydrogen. Okay. Again, there is nothing proprietary or anything else in any of this. Okay. And then we get our now we get this is the cost, I'm assuming, for a conventional truck, and then we get how much more are we going to spend for our new trucks, and the additional amount. The problem is, I wish this was easier. This is F35. You should put, whenever you possibly can, just put one cell in Excel. This is this additional amount. And I'm not going to tell you the top secret amounts that you're getting estimates for. But, okay, let's put this amount in. Okay, that's how much we get. And then, oops, where am I? I'm already on the truck. And this time you notice that we have our upfront cost per year. This distance per year really is our production. I should have kind of maybe put it again here. I didn't, but if we have a conventional truck, here's our distance, here's the diesel amount, and this time you can find it and press the F5 and the control thing, control square bracket and F5, and I allowed you to put a higher or lower cost of diesel in because that's going to make a big difference if we have to spend more for diesel. Okay. And then with the hydrogen, we have a different efficiency, and we do our cross multiply and divide because you just multiply that total distance in km by the kg, and you get the total amount of kg you have, which is a whole lot less than the liters of diesel you need, and then you get your total hydrogen cost. And in this scenario, I didn't put any additional cost for the truck. I said, oh, what happens if we just would, for some magic reason, not have to pay any extra? Look, in that case, the hydrogen would have given you a lot better cost. And maybe one day, oh, that would be so cool if the fundamental cost of a truck, if everybody in the world starts building these trucks, and maybe the cost of this, what's the inherent cost of this? Well, this is a hybrid, but what's the inherent cost of one of these versus conventional? Maybe one day the cost will come down. I don't really know what's going on in electric cars, because I told you I hardly ever drive, and then I have this van that I used to cart my dad around in for his wheelchair, and it's all falling apart and it's rusted. Enough. Okay, and so then am I I'm not in the right place. Here's our LCOR. R stands for refuse. Okay, LCOE, LCO distance. I don't know what we could T for truck. Okay, or lorry if we're in England. Okay, so we have our total hydrogen cost, and then there were a bunch of other insurance costs and all this, and we have the fuel cost, which is less, a lot less. So we have to somehow figure out and make a comparison of this to this. And they say a truck only lasts 7 years. If we make a truck last 10 years, again, we're going to get a very different answer. I don't know why it only lasts 7 years. Can't you? Let's make it 15 years. Okay. I think 7 years is the kind of answer we had. Maybe that's because they want to sell more trucks or something like that. And then we get the cost per kilometer. In this case, if we make it last a long, if it's only 7 years, then the capital is bigger than the fuel. If it lasts 15 years, then it's lower. We got to figure all that out. All right, I'm going to put 10 here as a compromise. Okay, and then we go all the way back. So the real lesson here is don't be afraid. It's like all this. Isn't modeling kind of cool? It's creative. It's not following some blah, blah, blah. Kenny Whitlaw is my friend. We go to the pub. He's the inventor of fast, and he has his people do all this stuff. I hope he doesn't get pissed off. And then he takes his Mac out and talks about his rules. And I love his philosophy, but his rules, I can't take. Sorry, Kenny. No, don't. Kenny's the best. This was not a negative thing. His philosophy on making flexible, accurate, structured, transparent models is the best. So that was totally not a bad thing to say. Okay, and I take anything back I said, and then we can see, well, what kind of price of electricity do we need to make this work? Or alternative, what kind of price what do the truck price has to be to make it work? Okay, and then we can look at this and get kind of a whole break-even analysis and let's put a reasonable cost of capital in, and this is starting to look a little bit better, and maybe we can find a strategy that really works. This is kind of exciting if I haven't done anything wrong, which I'm sure I have. Okay, the trucks have to have a longer life. We've kind of been through a lot of the issues, and I'm getting tired of talking, so this is the end of this video.